The good folks over at Star Wars Destiny Renewed Hope have done an incredible job at keeping this game alive following FFG's exit. In fact, there are arguments to be made, which I personally think are true, that as just a bunch of Star Wars nerds in their spare time, they have done a better job than FFG ever did. That said, there's one thing that ARH hasn't yet delivered in this game, which I'm very much looking forward to, and that is the return of a viable mill kill strategy. Come on, ARH, where's my mill kill? A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, Star Wars Destiny folks. Welcome back to Dice Commando and the Commando cast, and happy Destiny Friday. I hope everything's been going well for all of the big tournaments in the UK this weekend, which, if you're watching this, might already be underway, depending on when you're watching it. Good luck, have fun. You guys keeping IRL Destiny alive, very strong over there. I think Worlds is going to be in the UK. I would think it probably should be. But we'll see what the folks decide to do. All right, so yes, today I want to talk about mill kill. Mill kill, what the heck am I talking about? Let's bring up these folks back from the FFG days of Star Wars Destiny. One of my favorite decks of all time, Jyn Cassian. This is the classic mill kill archetype. Now, what I mean by this in general, mill kill in games, right, in gaming, may not necessarily be called mill kill, but what it really is it's a mid-range flex option that lets you pivot if needed and adapt based on how the game is going, what decks you run up against. I really enjoy this play style personally, and I also think that the mill kill archetype is very important not only in gaming and gaming theory, but also very, very important in Star Wars Destiny to help keep things in check. So now somebody's screaming at the screen right now, well, Obi-Wan's mill kill, and that's kind of true, but not really, right? Obi-Wan meets the criteria in terms of his die size compared to these two that I'm showing here. But he doesn't so much fit the mill kill strategy itself, right? Because a very important thing of this mid-range type deck is not just the ability to pivot, but also really it tends to be subpar in terms of power, and I'm talking this archetype in general, right? Like if you look at Jyn Cassian, it was subpar in terms of its ability to ramp and make resources, but it was above curve in the ability to always make your opponent make a bad decision, or never give them a great decision, is maybe a good way to say it, right? And if we go ahead and look over at Magic the Gathering, right, the big boy in the room talking game theory, a deck I enjoy playing or did when it was standard legal was Dimir Rogues. And what this did is it was a bunch of pretty cheap creatures. Some could come into play quickly, but the idea was that when they attacked, they would mill cards, or you would mill cards, and then they would get stronger based on the number of cards in your opponent's graveyard. It's very interesting. Against some decks you'd want to attack, against other decks you'd want to turtle and try and mill. It gave you a lot of flexibility based on that. I really loved the playstyle, very much how I enjoyed playing Jyn Cassian. And like I was going with the Obi-Wan part here, right? Just because he has the die sides isn't necessarily what I mean in the archetype. And primarily you look at Cassian, his ability that when he resolves, you have flexibility on how you want to play it. Jyn, her ability was absolutely freaking phenomenal, right? You look at her ability, look at the top 3 cards, then you put a card on top and mill it. Well, there's more to that just than, and by mill we mean put in the discard, right? From deck to discard is mill, right? If you're playing catch up, I think most of us around get that, but just to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. Her ability wasn't just to get rid of a good card they wanted, but it was also to set them up to waste more cards, right? Or set them up to not have the removal that they would want, or whatever it may be. Now, sure, in a game like Destiny where you draw a full hand, there's always an inherent advantage towards mill. We've talked about that in the past. But still, it's this type of archetype is flexibility, being able to pivot, fungibility probably. I mean, fungibility and flexibility is kind of the same thing, but it's fungibility is really being able to do two different things with the same tool. And that's really what this deck is. So we'll use that term. And the ability to really force never a good situation, right? Make your opponent kind of play suboptimally because there's no good right answer for them. So anyway, I think that's really exhausted this deck. Now, another key part of Millkill in terms of the, there's aggro, there's control, and as applied to Destiny, right, we do have aggro decks. Most decks in Destiny probably really realistically fall within the mid-range category. It's kind of hard because Destiny, you obviously start with things in play, meaning your dice. So that's kind of interesting on the whole, game theory thing. But I think most decks are mid-range. They drop upgrades and they drop supports, and dice are how you win the game, right? That's no secret to anybody here. And then we have our, pure full-on control decks, but we could also consider our ramp decks to be control decks. So it's a little different in this game, I grant you, but that's why these are so important, is because if you're up against control decks have a inherently in this game, control decks and mill decks have a distinct advantage. And if we harken back to the days of Jyn Cassian, one of the very strong mill decks back then was Yoda Leia, right? Blue 13 point, and then Senator Leia Mill was a very, very strong deck. And this deck could actually outmill that deck. Because of, in that matchup, it could actually outmill that deck because of forcing them to do removal, or they would, right, you'd actually make them to burn their cards. It was great. I've freaking loved it. On the other hand, it could do a different strategy against different decks. And these decks are very important that they don't rule the meta, right? They can't be too good. Otherwise, like if you give, like, there has to be a cost, an opportunity cost, I suppose, for that flexibility. So anyway, I've talked that at length. I love the play style, and I think it really has a place in Destiny, importantly, to keep those higher decks in control, because if they want, again, they only have 30 cards. Mill is a thing for them as well. If they want to spend the resources to continue to basically make you waste your resources, you're fine with that because it's still progressing your game plan no matter what happens, right? No matter what happens. All right, so the reason I have Boba Fett and Fennec Shand as my background today is because I actually think that thematically, these two would actually be a really cool, and I'm not necessarily saying neutral, but I think they'd be really cool as like a mill-kill type archetype. I think it would fit thematically. They were a pair, basically kind of embody the Jyn Cassian type thing. Now, we already have both of them in ARH, I get it. So where my head was going as I was taking my run this morning, what would fit Millkill thematically in Destiny or in Star Wars? And honestly, it's the new Andor movie, right? I'm not going to do any spoilers or not movie, the new Andor series, excuse me. I'm not going to give away any spoilers or anything like that. That's not the intent. But the first portion of it was there's a lot of intrigue. It was kind of a heist movie or heist arc to a certain extent. Great series, by the way. You should absolutely watch it. But I think that would fit really cool. Plus it's kind of a harken back to the early days of Cassian being Millkill. Bring Cassian back as Millkill, and then you can put him with his people, and his compatriots on the show. And then what would be interesting is, because you have the ISB side of things as well, right? The ISB characters historically in Destiny have been linked, right? You look at like Wolfe, Yularen, stuff like that. They have been linked really to Mill, right? Imperial leader Mill. That's kind of always been a sub-theme of sorts in the game. And I think that you could do some very cool things there as well. You could basically have a hero package and a villain package of Millkill. And I also think it's very important for the Millkill package to keep it red-yellow. I personally think that's important. That's certainly debatable. But if you go and you look at someone like Obi-Wan with the ability to make shields and stuff like that, I think you just, and by Obi-Wan, I mean Blue Hero's ability to make blue shields, I think if you go that direction, I think you just turn it into a mill deck. Like, I don't think, you know what I mean, right? Like, if you have someone who has, plus there's too many sides in play at that point, right? Like, again, I'll bring them up. If you look at Jyn and Cassian, they were really doing two things. They had guns and they had discard. So if you extrapolate that to, say, a blue hero, they're going to end up either having discard and shields, or they'll have melee and discard and a shield, and then probably they're too bad because they're too spread around. And to a certain extent, shields is kind of the same as a discard, not entirely, but kind of. So hopefully you are picking up what I'm laying down there in terms of I think it's going to be really hard for, I wouldn't want to have to design blue as mill kill because I think it'd be too hard. And I think that's why it's really neat because, plus think about the flexibility you have with yellow, right? Yellow can go two very different ways. You get kind of like the indirect package, you get kind of like I trade you money package. And then yellow has traditionally a lot of like tricks. And I think that pretty much fits the mill kill type thing. And then again, like I mentioned with ISB and Imperial leaders, you have kind of this like, we're going to put pressure on you from the top and control it. And I think the whole thing makes sense. And I think it's safer to keep it red-yellow. And I also think you want to stay away from gray because I think they just get drug into a mill deck. So anyway, I thought this was a cool discussion. I'd be very curious to hear what you all are thinking below. But I would love to see like a legit, fungible, mill kill archetype or sub-arc, right? Maybe that's what they do for the, I mean, I'm sure they're working on the Andor movies. I mean, again, I'm sure there are an expansion or two out already. No question about it. So could be many, many years down the line. But I would really love to see the return of a viable and legitimate and maybe even multi-character, and I don't mean a 3-wide, but I mean like, you know, maybe there's a Jin Cassian K2, right? Like, and then you can go Jin K2, Cassian Jin. You have some flexibility there and playing around with it. Either way, I was just thinking about that and I'd love to see it again. I miss it. And again, if the intro in any way implied that I wasn't happy with ARH, I don't think it did, but that wasn't the intent. I think they're killing it. I'm just giving a suggestion and I'd love to see it. But I'd also love to hear what you guys are thinking. You folks are thinking. Sorry, I'm working on that. What you folks are thinking. Again, let me know in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great time in the UK this weekend, folks. And go Commando.